Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a heartwarming story from the holiday season that shows how a grandmother's love and thoughtfulness can bridge the generation gap in the most unexpected ways. World's Best Grandma. I was working at a major UK video game store well over a decade ago, and there's a story from back then that always makes me chuckle. It was one of the most heartwarming things I've seen. One year, the big Christmas item was the Nintendo DS Lite with Nintendogs. The console came in blue or pink with the game packaged with the console. Unlike most big Christmas items, I actually loved this one since we had zero problems with stock. There were literally hundreds of them in the back room, so we never got yelled at by frantic Christmas present hunting parents over it. One morning, an older woman comes in and is browsing, looking slightly lost. She eventually walks into the Nintendo section, looks at a note she's written down, and then comes over to the counter to ask for some help. This was par for the course around Christmas. A lot of parents and grandparents with Christmas lists looking befuddled. I go over to the Nintendo section with her, and she hands me the note she was looking at. Grandma, my daughter says my 16-year-old grandson would like one of these for Christmas. Am I looking at the right thing? The note said Nintendo DS, so I told her that yes, she was in the right place. She did a little smile and neck swivel at this, obviously proud she'd got it right. We talked about the different options of packages with games, accessories, etc., etc. Then she pauses for a second and says, Grandma, I'm not sure if I should ask this or not. I'm not sure if it's okay to ask. I was 90% sure she was going to ask for a discount, so I just said that she can ask whatever she likes, and I promised I'd be okay. Grandma, my grandson has recently turned gay. Okay, not what I was expecting, and that's not really how it works, but she was trying, bless her. Grandma, does that mean he'd like the pink one? I've got to admit that I had to work hard to keep a straight face because this caught me completely off guard. I desperately wanted to laugh, but I also didn't want her to be embarrassed. I could tell it was a genuine, earnest question, and she was trying really hard to get something he'd like. I took a second to collect myself a bit and think how to respond. Me. Well, being gay doesn't necessarily mean he likes pink things, but it also doesn't mean he doesn't. Does he have other pink things? Grandma. Well, no, but up until now he's been pretending to be not gay. So I don't know if he'd have pink things even if he wanted to. And I don't want to assume he'd like the pink one because I think he'd think I'm making fun of him. We had a bit more of a chat, and I explained that it's up to her, but whatever she bought, as long as it wasn't opened, could be exchanged for a different one if he wanted to change it. The policy at the time was that anything bought in the run-up to Christmas didn't have the exchange and refund 30-day start until December 26th. She decided to get the black one and have a think about it. Grandma. He likes the color black, so I think he'll like this one. That afternoon, she comes back in, and her grandson is with her. Now, she cannot have been a hair over 5'1". He was 6'2" of gangly teenage metalhead, long hair, black Slayer shirt, ripped jeans, long black leather jacket and boots. It wasn't far off that photo of The Undertaker with his grandma. They come over to the counter and she asked to exchange the DS for the pink Nintendogs one with a bit of a smile. As they leave, I heard them talking. Teenage Undertaker. Thanks, Nana. Grandma. Now remember, just because you know what you're getting, it doesn't mean you're allowed it before Christmas Day. Teenage Undertaker, I know, Nana. I love stories like this, with folks just trying to understand and love their families. And our second story. Neighboring builder using our property without permission. We recently purchased a vacant lot with plans to start building our dream home this year. The mortgage is already a heavy burden, so we've been doing everything we can to ensure the process goes smoothly. However, a couple of months ago, we discovered that someone had dumped about 10 cubic meters of contaminated soil on our land. We quickly realized this might have been our fault since we hadn't put up temporary fencing and weren't checking the lot as often as we should have. Being new to this, we didn't anticipate these kinds of issues. Further inspection revealed that the builders on the lots behind and beside us had been using our land for access, storage, and more. We approached both builders, but they denied any involvement with the soil dump. However, they couldn't deny that they'd been using our lot for other purposes, and both agreed to clean up the mess they were responsible for. After a week with no action, we reported the situation to the council. Unfortunately, while they couldn't find the builders for a few small infractions, we were told the contaminated soil was now our problem to deal with. The quotes we received to remove it ranged from $2,000 to $4,000. Needless to say, we put up temporary fencing that same week. Today I went to check the lot after a couple of days and found an entire house's worth of timber frames dumped on our land. The frames had one of the neighboring builders' company logos all over them. To make matters worse, they'd removed our temporary fencing to place the materials there, leaving the lot wide open. The frames were positioned so awkwardly that I couldn't even put the fencing back up without encroaching onto the footpath, and we didn't have enough fencing to go around them. I immediately reported this to the council, who responded within 15 minutes to take photos. They assured us that they would issue more fines to the builder and continue to fine them if they failed to remove the materials promptly. Meanwhile, the builder responsible tried calling me twice, but I was too angry to engage, so I hung up both times. I did text him to say that if he wanted to communicate, he should do so via text or email so that I'd have a paper trail. This whole situation has left us feeling discouraged and exhausted, as if our property rights mean nothing. It's incredibly frustrating to think that someone could just enter our land, remove our fencing, and do as they please without facing any real consequences. Edit. The offending builder eventually emailed me, essentially asking that I contact him directly instead of involving the council when he does illegal things on our property. He claimed that the materials were only going to be there for 24 hours and wouldn't cause any inconvenience. After some reflection, we decided to take matters into our own hands. We hired a professional surveyor to clearly mark the boundaries of our lot, leaving no room for doubt. Then we sent a formal letter to the builder demanding the immediate removal of the materials and restitution for the damages caused. To our surprise, the builder responded quickly. They removed the timber frames the next day, restored our fencing, and even offered to cover part of the cost for the contaminated soil removal as a goodwill gesture. We also decided to install a site CCTV system to monitor the property and ensure that nothing like this happens again. And our next story. Take breaks exactly on the dot? No problem. Context. Back then, when I was in high school, I was working at a crepe place in a food court. My boss, Tammy, is a Chinese lady. I'm Chinese too. Chinese people always like to bend the rules a bit. Asking you to work OT or shave time off your break was normal, but this was in Richmond, BC. I was always working 8-hour shifts after school, and because it was a small storefront, there were 2 other people besides me, Kevin and manager. Kevin was my friend since elementary, and the manager was a really chill dude. It was 6:50 p.m., the store was busy as hell, we had a long line of customers, and all 3 of us were working our butts off, Tammy was at home, churning out crepes. Soon it was 7, and it was my time for my 30-minute unpaid break. Kevin was supposed to get his at 7:30, but the line was super long, and I thought it'd be a jerk move to just leave my coworkers there while I eat my lunch. Or dinner, same difference. Eventually, I went on break at 7:15-ish, and I was going to take my long 30-minute unpaid break. At 7:30, Kevin went on break, and a few customers came to order food. My manager handled it no problem. Then Tammy calls me during my break and says she saw me through the security camera that I was taking a longer break, which I wasn't, and demanded that I go back even when I was only halfway through my break. Of course, I protested and told her the situation. She said, "You have so many problems, just go back to work. Just take your break at the time you were supposed to, not a minute early and not a minute late. You don't need a 30-minute break. Go back to work now." Rough Chinese to English translation. And this is the part where Chinese people try to bend the rules. I told her my phone's connection was bad and that I couldn't hear the last part she was saying, and asked if she could text it to me. Sure enough, she did. A few days later, I was on a shift working with her fiance, a Korean gentleman that didn't speak English that well. He mostly just worked in the back, making batter and stuff for the crepes, albeit at a very slow pace because he knows he's not going to get fired. P.S. This isn't a conflict of interest? Kevin had a volleyball tournament, so he called in sick ahead of time, and Tammy didn't bother to call in someone else to man the store. My break was at 7 as well, and as expected, a huge line formed in front of the store. I took off my apron and went to get food. I purposely sat in front of the store within view of the security camera and started chowing down. Tammy called me, and it went as follows. Tammy: "Go back to work. It's so busy." Me: "I'm on my break." Tammy: "You already rested. It's time to go back to work." It's 7:13. I just sat down with the food that I ordered. Me: No. Last time you told me to go on break on the dot. Tammy, don't you see that he's working all by himself? Don't you have any sympathy? Me, last time I worked my butt off and you forced me to eat only half my lunch and told me to work 15 minutes unpaid. You didn't have sympathy at that time. Plus, it's not like you're going to fire him anyway. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to finish eating my food before it gets cold. Bye. I hung up and Tammy started bombarding my phone. I ignored it and I ate until 7:29, after which I put on my apron, which took 30 seconds tops, and was behind the counter before 7:30. She texted me afterwards and told me that she would be docking my pay for an additional 30 minutes because I didn't help out during the break. I took a screenshot of that conversation and sent it right back to her along with the previous screenshot I took of our conversation where she told me to work during my break. I told her she can dock my pay all she wants, but I'll send this to the Ministry of Labor along with a letter telling them that she hired her fiancé. She fired me the next shift because I wore a graphic tee under my apron. She told me it was unsightly because my graphic tee had a depiction of a slice of pizza that negatively impacted the reputation of the store. I didn't send anything to the Ministry of Labor, but I made sure everyone I knew knows that Tammy is in fact a Karen. You should definitely send something to the Ministry of Labor. She'll keep doing this to other people. And our last story. Neighbor Karen threatening me over property line. I bought my house in June of 2023, and like any responsible homeowner, I had a survey done before putting up my fence. Everything seemed fine until 5 months later when my neighbor suddenly accused me of encroaching on her property by anywhere from 1 to 5 feet. She pointed to an old dock where a previous owner once had a fence and a metal stake in the ground that she claimed marked the boundary. If this stake were the true border, it'd mean my fence is around 3 to 4 feet over the line. My neighbor promised to share her survey with me, but I suspect it's much older than mine, considering she's lived here for 20 to 30 years. Meanwhile, I reached out to my surveyor, asking him to come back and recheck our property line. I also invited my neighbor to be present during the survey, though we haven't scheduled it yet. The whole situation's incredibly stressful. All I want is to be left alone and let my dog run free in our yard. To make matters worse, the neighbor's granddaughter even threatened me with property damage if I move the fence back, despite my attempts to keep things civil and find a solution. As the situation unfolded, my neighbor began acting like a full-blown Karen. She started making a scene every time she saw me, loudly claiming that I was trying to steal her land and that she'd been there long before I moved in. She even went as far as to threaten to call the police on me if I didn't immediately move my fence back, despite having no actual proof that I was in the wrong. But then I had a eureka moment. I double-checked my survey and realized I'd been measuring from my deck instead of my foundation. When I went outside and measured correctly, I discovered I actually have 2 more feet after my fence, and they just built a fancy new shed right on our property line. Curious, I swung by the county zoning office to see how legal their shed was, and it turns out they don't have permits for it and may have built it on land where they're not allowed to. After my surveyor came back to verify the boundaries, it was confirmed the shed was indeed on my property. Armed with this information, I approached my neighbor and let them know that they would have to move their shed off my land. Predictably, she threw a fit, accusing me of being petty and unreasonable, and even going so far as to insist that I should just let it go since it wasn't a big deal. But when I calmly mentioned the lack of permits and potential zoning violations, her attitude quickly shifted. She realized she didn't have a leg to stand on legally, and threats of calling the police stopped. Begrudgingly, she agreed to have the shed moved. In the end, they had to dismantle the shed and relocate it off my property. The whole situation was exhausting, but at least now I can enjoy my yard without any unwelcome surprises, and my dog can run free without any fear of more Karen drama. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.